Hey, I'm Juan Esteban Garcia, and in this video I'm going to show you everything that you need to know to use the WhatsApp webhooks in your application. You are going to learn what a webhook is. You are also going to learn in detail how the WhatsApp webhook works, and also I'm going to resolve and answer some of the questions that a lot of you have sent us, and we have seen a lot of comments from people asking about specific questions about the usage and functionality of this API. So we're going to resolve those questions, and I'm also going to show you the easiest way to start using the webhooks in your application, and this way will save you 95% of the time that people usually spend when they're setting up this webhook in their applications. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so if you remember, in the second video of this video series of the WhatsApp Business API, I showed you how to send text messages, I showed you how to start using the API, and I also touched on the topic of using WhatsApp webhooks. And so I show you briefly how to use them, how they work, but I know that there's a lot of confusion and there are a lot of topics that weren't covered in that video. So that's why I'm recording this one, and I'm hoping to resolve a lot of the questions and show you in detail how it works. So as you can see here, we are using Wasapi. And basically Wasapi is this application that we're going to use for this video. This is an application that will enable us to easily replicate a lot of the scenarios that you will have when you're using this application with real clients. But everything that you're going to learn here, you will be able to apply even if you're not using Wasapi. So I just want you to keep that in mind, because essentially you won't be wasting your time watching this video even if you're using Wasapi. So I'm going to log into Wasapi. And if you remember in the second video that I mentioned a few moments ago, in that video we were using a tool called Glitch. And basically Glitch was this tool that lets you test webhooks and to see different requests. But in this video we're not going to use that one. We're actually going to use another tool called Ngrok, which is super useful. And the first thing that you're going to notice is that I'm actually running Wasapi locally. But I mean, as you know, we also have the production version, but for the sake of this video, to make things easier, I'm going to use the local version. And if I go here to localhost in the port 8000, you are going to notice that I already have here the Wasapi API running in my computer. And so this is going to make our life a lot easier. And the first thing that we are going to use is the tool that I mentioned, Ngrok. And basically you just have to install Ngrok in your computer in case you don't have it. And if you notice here, I have the server running in the 8000 port. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a tunnel, an HTTP tunnel using the port 8000. So if I type this command, you will notice that here I have this URL. And basically what this URL does is that this is a public URL, so this is a URL that people can use. And actually, if I grab it and I go to this URL, oh wait a minute, if I go to the port 8000, yeah, you see that sometimes it gives you this error. You can ignore this warning. This is not an unsafe site. Yeah, it looks like I won't be able to load it here, but you can see, I mean, you will notice in a moment that this is simply exposing this local host to the world. And so now that I have done this, the first thing that you're going to do as well is, well, actually, if I come here, you see that if I come here to the settings of my application, I already spent some time setting this up. So if I go here to Wasapi, I created the application that I'm using for this. So you see that here I have my token and I have the different information. And also here in phone number, you will notice that I already have a phone number that I'm using for testing purposes. And so if I come here to getting started, you will see that I already added this recipient phone number. This is the number that I will be using in this video for testing purposes. And so now that I have created this, and so for example, you see that I have the phone ID and the information and everything, Wasapi gives me a way to view the webhook info. And so I'm going to grab this URL that this is giving me here, because basically this is the URL that we are going to use to receive the request. And so one thing, I mean, in case you don't know in detail what a webhook is essentially just a way to have different applications to communicate. And so if you want to communicate between different applications, and for example, if you want to exchange messages every time that there's a specific event, every time that you get a notification, every time that someone places an order or something, then a webhook is a way for you to do that. And so essentially what we're doing here is just having an endpoint, a simple route that Facebook will use to send us notifications every time that there is a specific event. And so I will show you in a second how to set this up. So here's the webhook URL. I'm just going to copy it. And if I come here, I paste this URL. So as you can see, it generates a specific URL, a specific route for each application, for each phone number. And also I'm going to use a verification token, and this token is a random token that Wasapi generates. So if I save it, you see that it works. Oh, and the first thing that I want to show you is that if I go to localhost in the port 4040, you will see that, well, you will see that here, this is the initial request that we did here, but also we just got another request from Facebook, and this is passing the verification token, and basically this is just a test request that Facebook does to simply like let the server know that, hey, I'm validating that this URL works. And so you see that as long as we return a 200 response, then Facebook will know that the webhook is set up correctly, and it will continue to use this URL and validate it. So in order to follow along, I mean, if you're going to follow along this video, what I suggest you to do is simply to set up a random URL. It doesn't have to be this long, it can be any route that you want, and just make sure that it always returns a 200 response. So as long as it doesn't return any errors, or as long as the server isn't down, then you will be able to see all the different requests that we're going to make here. All right, so now that this is set up, let's actually start to send some text messages just to see the different responses that we get from the server. Okay, so if I come here to the chat page, and for example, I try to send a message to a random contact. I'm actually going to use, for example, this one. If I try to send a text message like, hey, good morning, or whatever, if I send that, then you will notice that here I got an error, and let's actually inspect why I got that error. So one thing that you should keep in mind, and this is actually something that people have asked us, is that yes, I mean, if you're sending text messages, if you're sending messages to people, you must absolutely, I mean, unless you don't care whether or not the message was delivered, which I don't think is your case, but if you are sending a message and you need to know the status of the message, then it is very important for you to set up a webhook. Because, for example, I sent a message, and every time that I send a message, I always get, as long as it is properly formatted, and as long as you don't have any errors in your request, then you're always going to get a 200 response, basically saying that yes, the message, I mean, some people interpret it as if it was sent. I mean, if you get a 200 response, people think that that means that the message was sent, but no, actually that the only thing that means is that the request was received and that it was processed properly without errors. But then if you want to know whether or not the message was delivered, then for that you need to use a webhook. And as you are seeing here, in this case, for example, I tried to send a test message, but the status says that it failed. And it failed because, and here's the reason, it says message failed to send because more than 24 hours have passed since the customer last replied to this number. Okay, so remember that every time that you're starting a conversation with a customer, you have to use a template message. I mean, you have to use a message template for that. You cannot send just a random message. You cannot simply say, hey, how's it going? Because basically WhatsApp has this restriction in place to make sure that people don't use this platform as a spam platform. So that's basically the way what they're doing it that way. But I mean, I created a template beforehand. This is something that I created prior to recording this video. So you see here that I have a test greeting, And you see that here I have, basically I'm just sending an image. I'm sending a simple message saying, hey, Binix Code wants to wish you an amazing day, God bless. And here they have the option to use these two responses, these two buttons, thank you and you too. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to start a conversation. So here, well, actually before I do that, I want to show you that I already have the different templates set up here. So that way I can simply come to here where it says start conversation, and I'm going to choose this test greeting. And let me first start by uploading the image that I'm going to send in the message. So you see here that it says image, and I actually want to use the contact name that I have here in my contacts database. So if I show you here, you will notice that I already have a few different contacts, and for example I'm using this label, and here in the YouTube test, I mean this is the one that I'm going to use for this video. So I'm going to say that I want to I have this dynamic variable. I want this to be populated with the person's first name. So this is what I'm going to do. So this token will automatically replace the name. And you see that here I have the option to choose between labels and individual contacts. I'm actually just going to use individual contact. This video is going to be a lot easier to do it that way, but again, like if I were to use a label, it will show me that in this case I only have two contacts labeled as a YouTube test, and so this will be the only two contacts that will get the message. So for individual contacts, I'm going to use one is YouTube, and it's as simple as that. I'm just going to click here where it says send message, confirm, and so you see here, yeah, you see that I got an alert because I already have this phone number here, and you see that the execution log says that it was sent. I mean, I can also create a campaign to do this, but just to keep it simple, let's do it this way. And so you see here that it says, hey Juanes, Binix Code wants to wish you an amazing day. So right now, as soon as I do that, if I come here to this place, you see that I get a notification, and this is actually very important. I got a notification saying that the message was sent. Okay, sent but not delivered, even though it was already delivered. But actually, if let me try to open here in my phone number, and you see that that I already got the message, but actually, I mean, it looks like in order to change the status of this, so you see that in order to get a deliver notification, I actually have to open the application here in my computer. But you see that as soon as I do that, I get a following notification saying deliver. Okay, so the first notification was saying that it was sent. So basically, that's at that point, you just mark one, like you just use the one check icon here. But in this case, you see a double check saying that the message was sent. But if I simply open the message, so let's actually do it this way. So if I come here and I open the message, then you are going to notice that the status of this notification changed here. And so it's actually very useful because here it says message, it looks like this is run. I mean, this is actually a message read, but it says message delivered. But again, here, now that this is showing me these two blue icons, then that basically means that the message was read because we got a notification from WhatsApp saying that the message was read. And so one thing that is super important for you to know, and actually I want to answer that, this is basically the answer to some of the questions that I have received, is that you see that you get a message ID. And so for example, I mean, this is actually a status ID, and this notification is just a status update letting you know that one of the messages that you sent changed the status. And so initially you get the notification saying that hey, it was sent, and you get this WAM ID, which stands for WhatsApp Message ID. And it is very important, and this is something that people have asked me, and the answer is yes, you do have to keep track of these messages in your database. I mean, you need to have some sort of database. I mean, actually, I'm going to show you another way in which you can skip that whole process. But for now, if you're going to build this yourself, then you do need to keep track of this information in your database. You do need to keep a log of the different WhatsApp messages that you are sending. And for that reason, you have to keep track of the WhatsApp message ID. Because you see that in any subsequent request, it uses the same ID. And so with this ID in your database, you will be able to know, okay, I got this notification, I got this message, and now this message was actually delivered. And then when you get the following notification, then this message was actually read. And so this is the way you can keep track of this, and you can also change the information of the message here. All right, so just keep that in mind. And let's actually try to reproduce some other typical scenarios that you encounter when you are like dealing with real-time communication with your clients. Okay, so one thing that I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to open here the conversation, and this is what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm going to send a random message. For example, if I click here where it says thank you, and yeah, you see that I get the message here. And let's actually do something else. Let's send also a text message. Hey, thanks for that. And I also want to send an image, so I don't know, this image will do. And the last thing that I want to do is I want to record a message. So, hey, testing 1 2 3, whatever. So I'm just going to do this. So I mean, the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to show you different replies, different notifications that you get from WhatsApp depending on the message. Okay, so if I come here to Ngrok, you will notice that the first notification that I got was a message notification. This was not a status notification, this was actually a message notification. And here you will notice that the message type is button. And the reason why it says button is because I click on this button that I got here. Even though it was just a regular text message, the truth is that WhatsApp treats this kind of answer as a button response, as a button message. So keep that in mind, and you see that here's the payload and the text, and every single time we get the WhatsApp message ID, and so it is important for you to store this information as well. So this is the first message that we got here. Now the second message was just a regular text message, and you see that it says here message, and here's the text, and here's the body, and it says hey, thanks for that. And so you use this information and you store it in your database. This is the body. And let's look at the second message, because these two are actually very interesting, and these two are very particular. And because here, when someone sends us an image, we actually get a message with the type image, but we don't get a URL. And it's important for you to know this, because this is something that has caused a lot of confusion to people. And essentially you don't get a URL that you can use to display it here. No, you actually get a media ID. And so you see here that we get this ID. And now if I come here to the media API, you will see that I have the like some different information. And if you want to retrieve a specific media ID, then you use this API. You basically make a request here, and you pass your token, and here in media ID you replace this with the actual ID. So in this case it will be something like this that you're seeing here, and with this information you simply display you basically have the URL. This is the response that you get. So you see that it says URL, and with this URL you make a request to the server, and this is actually the next endpoint that you see here, get media URL. And then you have to make a request to the URL that Facebook gave you, but make sure that when you make this request, you are also passing the better token, basically the user token that you saw here in the configuration page. Or keep in mind that it's also possible for you to generate a permanent token, so that you don't have to be refreshing and renewing your token every 24 hours. So when you make that request, you see that you get a response, and that's essentially what we're doing here. because if I open this image in a new tab, you will see that the image it's actually being stored in our servers, and basically with this URL, this is what we use to display to the user. And the same thing happens with an audio file. So here is that we get the URL and we get an ID, and we just use this information to do the same process to get the media ID, to upload it to some server, and then this is what we display to the user. So if I reproduce the audio, so hey, testing 1 2 3, whatever. So you see that it works just fine, and I'm just using this information to store it in my database. And a couple of things that I want to you to know before we wrap up this video. The first thing is that when you get these kind of messages, if your server is down or if your server has some sort of error, if it returns an error response, then basically WhatsApp will try to send you this message, and it will continue to send you notifications for a time frame of 24 hours. So within those 24 hours, let's say that your website went down for a few seconds, then WhatsApp will try to send you the message later. So it is important for you to know that, because yeah, you're just going to get a notification several times until you get a successful response from the server, and at that point WhatsApp will assume that everything went well, and it won't continue to send you the same notification. So that's one thing. The second thing, and it's very important for you to keep this in mind, because WhatsApp, I mean, and this is actually something quite funny, but WhatsApp sends you multiple notifications of a different message. So during the day, they have like changes in their database and something, and they send you notifications at different times for the same WhatsApp message. And so it is important that you validate the WhatsApp message ID, because basically, if you're storing this information in your database and you are keeping track of this, then every time that you get a notification in the webhook, then you should simply keep that in mind, and you should validate whether or not you already have the same information in your database. So if it's the same message, you should simply say, oh, do I already have this WhatsApp message ID in my database? If you do have it, then you can skip the notification that WhatsApp sent you, or if it's a status change, then you can make the changes necessary in your database. But I just want you to keep that in mind, because this is something that people have asked us. It is quite funny. You get all sorts of notifications all day long, so make sure that you are validating every single request that you get from WhatsApp. And so I hope that this was really useful. There's actually a lot more things that we can cover in this video, and essentially my goal with this was to make sure that you can use this information and apply it to your own programming language, because I know that some people are using C#, other people are using ASP.NET, or people are using PHP, Python, Ruby, etc. And so with this information, I just wanted to give you a high-level overview on how the API works, and then you can take this knowledge and apply it to your own specific needs and to your own programming language. Now, you have probably noticed that there are actually a lot of different details and minor things that you have to keep in mind when you are implementing this API. And so it's not very intuitive, it's not super simple, and it does have a level of complexity. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because, I mean, you can simply take this information and build your own implementation, and you will be good. I mean, you will be able to use this API yourself. But for example, I know that a lot of people are sending messages. I know that a lot of people are using this information to create text messages. And as you have noticed, it's not only a matter of sending the message, but you actually have to keep like some sort of log to determine whether or not the same message was sent, or if you got some sort of error. And if you want to avoid all the effort of having to build this yourself, and if you want to avoid all the time of having to build this on your own, then I actually want to tell you some good news, and is that you can use Wasapi, as you have already noticed. I mean, Wasapi is developer friendly. This is a tool that we have built with developers in mind as well, because we know that a lot of people won't be using this interface to send text messages, and a lot of people actually want to automate some internal operations that they have in their company or in their applications. And if you are one of those people, then I want you to know that Wasapi is developer friendly, and using Wasapi API, you can actually just save yourself the hassle of having to build this and you can simply use the API to send the text message. And if you want to like keep track of the different logs and messages that you are sending, then you can use this API, because we would simply, using our API, we would store this information in our database. We already have an entire infrastructure in place for this, and so we will take care of the rest. You just have to send the message, you just have to use our API, and then we just do the rest. We just keep track of this information, we store it in our system, and then if you want to see, because actually, this is something that I forgot to tell you earlier, but there is no way right now for you to, and it has never existed, there is no way for you to use the WhatsApp API to say, hey, give me a log of the entire conversation that I had with this phone number. No, there's no way for you to do that. But using our API, we do have a way to use that. We give you a way to store this information. We have our own database. We take care of uploading the messages. We take care of keeping track of the status of the messages. We take care of all of that for you. And so if you want to save yourself 95% of the time that you would usually take to build this on your own, then you can simply leverage the Wasapi API in your computer, in your application, and start using the WhatsApp API in no time. I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it was very useful. If you have any other questions, please leave it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and also to click on the bell icon to get a notification every time that we upload a new video. Thank you so much, and until the next time.